The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the 6th chapter. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away to a deserted place, all by yourselves, and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. As he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. When they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret and moored the boat there. When they got out of the boat, people at once recognized him and rushed about that whole region and began to bring the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, into villages or cities or farms, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and begged him that they might touch even the fringe of his cloak. And all who touched it were healed. The Gospel of the Lord. Something to notice about this passage from the Gospel according to Mark is the deleted scenes. There are stories omitted from the passage we heard. The part that's missing is what happens after Jesus begins to teach the crowds that have discovered where he is hiding. The disciples realize that it's late, they didn't pack food, and all of these thousands of people are going to need to eat. Jesus says, "You give them something to eat." So they scrounge around and borrow 5 loaves, 2 fish. You know the rest of the story for a different day. And after that, Jesus sends the disciples by boat to Bethsaida on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, while Jesus goes to the mountain to pray. As they travel overnight, the wind picks up. They struggle with the boat, and Jesus walks out on the sea past the disciples, which at first didn't help their situation. They're terrified, thinking like a ghost is coming for them. Jesus sees they are terrified, gets in their boat, the wind calms, and the disciples are astounded. They don't get how he fed those people. They don't get how he walked on the water. They don't get how the wind stopped. And that's where our reading today picks back up. We hear Jesus call the disciples to rest, and we see the crowds swarming Jesus to be healed. But in the middle of that sandwich are the stories of the miraculous feeding and walking on water. Another thing to notice in these stories is the clamor for Jesus. People want Jesus. There is a constant strain for people to find Jesus. People wanted to hear what he had to say. People wanted to experience the healing that came even from touching the fringe of his cloak, as the woman with the hemorrhage discovered. It must have been overwhelming for so many people to want and need you. The text says, many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. Through the clamor, Jesus reminded the disciples that there was something important that was missing. In this scene, eating together was a priority for Jesus. More than the ministry, more than the teaching, more than the healing, more than the constant clamor. The disciples were missing this one important piece. Even if the disciples were healing and serving and engaged in the greatest ministry the world has ever known, but they failed to eat together. Well, in Jesus' mind, they missed what it was all about. Jesus calls the disciples to resist through rest. Resist the urge to be defined by what you do and just be. If you treat life like a race, you may lose the purpose of living. There's a liturgy in our hymnal called Affirmation of Christian Vocation that includes these words: Both your work and your rest are in God. Both work and rest in God. The purpose of your work is in God, but the purpose of your rest is also in God. God cares about both. Hustle culture says you are what you do. You are what you create. You are what you earn. Make a buck, achieve, get to the next level, advance your career, work harder than everyone else, and you'll reap the rewards. How does any of that align with Jesus saying, "You forgot to eat together"? This episode fits nicely in conversation with Psalm 23, where we hear, "The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. I have what I need in God. I don't need any of the other stuff that Empire says I need to be whole." As the hymn says, "All I have needed, thy hand hath provided." The struggle is in convincing yourself it's true. There is always going to be a clamor, someone needing something from you. Jesus says, don't forget to eat together. Sometimes wellness looks like giving others the best of you, not what's left of you. Self-care isn't selfish. For some people, resting isn't hard. For others, it is, particularly if you find your sense of self-worth in what you accomplish. When you rest, you are resisting the urge to find your purpose in achieving. You are not valuable because of what you do. You are valuable because God created you and claims you. You are worthy of love, designed for relationship. You are valuable for being you. I'm convinced that above everything else that Jesus wants for you, he wants you to eat with other people. It's so simple, yet so profound. He wants you to eat with your family. He wants you to eat with your friends. He wants you to eat with people who have nothing in common with you. Again, if we put this in conversation with Psalm 23, we hear that God prepares a table for you in the presence of your enemies. Because around a table is where our prejudices collapse. Around a table is where our biases are drained of their assumptions. Around a table is where our humanity is rebalanced. It was around a table that Jesus said, "This is my body. I'm giving it up for you. This is my blood. I'm pouring it out for you." The disciples looked at the clamor for Jesus and saw a way to be defined by what they could accomplish. Jesus looked at the clamor and said, "Come away by yourself, rest a while." Serving, helping, teaching, healing others are all important kinds of ministry and can be wonderful, but they can lose their meaning if you forget to connect it to the source of all life and nurture the most important relationships around you. Amen.